Thanks for joining us on the developer community call today. A little bit about the community call. Dana kind of covered this. They're the third Tuesday of every month. She'll be sending out the new invites so you can get those on your calendars. The goal behind the community call, obviously, is to talk about things that are new and how you can use it and how it can help you build better Teams apps. And spend some time getting to know the product teams behind Microsoft Teams, as well as some prominent members of our community. And at the end of today's, we'll do a pretty deep Q&A, and I'll hang around for a while and answer any questions anybody has. Presenter, that's me. I'm Andrew Clear. You can always reach me out on Twitter at aclear16. I'm also pretty easy to find on LinkedIn because I think I'm the only Andrew Clear. And so yeah, feel free to reach out and ask me any questions you have at any time about Teams, particularly about building apps on the Teams platform. If I don't know the answer, I will point you in the right direction. For a little bit of background on me, for those of you that don't know me, I'm a senior PM on the Teams platform team. My particular responsibilities are conversational bots, as well as documentation, samples, and then I do a lot of work with a bunch of other teams on sort of our training modules that exist. And I'll talk a bit about some of the stuff that's new in that world, as well as the focus of today's call, which is on Teams and the bot framework. About 11 months ago, for those of you who were around 11 months ago, on a community call in January, we announced the V4 Beta SDK for Teams bots. And what that meant, we were pretty excited. The V4 SDK for the bot framework had been out for a while, and we needed to get support for Teams-specific functionality inside the V4 SDK, which was significantly different than the V3 SDK. For those of you who weren't around back in the V3 days, it changed quite a bit. So we were pretty excited to get these beta SDKs out. But unfortunately, that kind of left us in this state. The bot framework at the time was on 4.2 or 4.3 of their SDK. The Teams SDK extensions, the Teams-specific extensions that were GA, were built from the Bot Builder SDK v3. The Teams SDKs for v4 were in beta, and they were also built on the v4 SDK, the v4.0 SDK. The Teams developer documentation was covering v3 bots. The bot framework was only covering v4 bots. Samples were kind of all over the place. Pretty much, it was a mess. We figured we should probably fix that. We took some feedback from a lot of folks. We went to the community and we asked a bunch of people what their thoughts were, where their pain points were on getting started building bots on Teams, and we came up with some guiding principles on what we thought we should be targeting for. Number one, we never wanted to end up in this state again. We didn't want to be in a state where the bot framework SDK and Teams support in the bot framework SDK were out of sync. And the documentation and the samples were out of sync. We wanted to make sure that we were converging towards a place where that just wasn't possible to happen. Another big thing was starting to work towards consistent developer tooling support across the platforms. If you've ever built bots for Teams, which I hope most of you have at least explored it a little bit, you'll know that things like the bot framework emulator, using the test the bot functionality in Azure has varying degrees of success as a representation of what you will see inside Teams. We are definitely aware of that problem, and that's something we want to go away and to continually get better. And the bottom line is it should be pretty easy to make bots on Teams when you're using a Microsoft bot framework. All work happily together. So unfortunately, in order to meet these goals, we needed to rebuild some stuff and rethink about the way that we were shipping this. So it took us a bit longer to get out of that a mess than we really wanted it to. But we're really happy to announce that what we've done is we've made Teams a first-class citizen on the bot framework, and we think this is the right direction. And this is how we're going to meet those sort of higher level goals of moving in lockstep together, so building a consistent set of development tools that works no matter kind of which way you get into this world of building bots, and at the end of the day, just makes it easier to build bots on Teams. So what this means, Teams is now in the core Bot Framework SDKs. As of Bot Framework version 4.6, Teams specific functionality is just included natively in the SDK. There's no second set of SDKs that you need to go find and download. Teams bot samples exist inside the core Bot Framework sample repository. We link to them from the Teams documentation side, but we have a full set of bot samples inside the Bot Framework sample repository. And we did pretty much a complete rewrite of the Teams bot documentation. Restructured it, moved it around a bit, and did a lot of work there to align it with the new samples, and made sure we had code sample support for inline code samples for all of our supported languages, not just where before it was a little bit random on what you were going to see there. Now we pretty consistently have C#, JavaScript, and the REST samples for pretty much everything. In practice, what this means is, all the Teams functionalities in the SDK. Those Teams beta SDKs that we announced 11 months ago, they're going straight from beta to deprecated. They will never be GA, and we will never, moving forward, we will not recommend that you use them. Teams functionalities will be in all future releases of the Bot Framework SDK. Pretty cool because they move on a 2-month release cadence, and we'll be able to take advantage of any advances in the Bot Framework pretty much as soon as the SDKs get out. What about my existing whatever version bot? The bottom line is that they'll all keep working, right? If you still have a V3 bot in production, it's not going to stop working all of a sudden. If you've got a V4.2 bot with the beta SDKs that's working in production, it's not going to magically stop working. It does mean that we will not be adding support for new features to older versions of the SDK. Moving forward, basically, will be the upgrade path will be pretty clean once you get to 4.6 of the SDKs. Any further upgrades to the SDK should be non-breaking, and so future functionality will just be rolled into the point releases for the Bot Framework SDK. If we identify any critical security issues in the old ones, we'll of course address those. But in general, your old bots will keep working. And remember, this is all just REST endpoints, right? You can always take advantage of new features using straight REST calls, but you just won't get full SDK support and strong typing and all of those sorts of things for it. But you can always drop down to the REST calls and just JSON and go about your business. So first off, why we think this is awesome. And we're pretty excited about this. I think this is the right direction for everyone to go. And it will be a little awkward as we make it through this transition phase. But again, we should never end up in this mess again. So one of the big reasons is the Bot Framework v4 is awesome. It's if you haven't looked at the current version of the Bot Framework SDK, it'll look quite a bit different if you're used to an earlier version. It has an adapter that does activity processing, which basically acts like an eventing model where you get to subscribe to events. State management's quite a bit easier to deal with. If you've done anything with Thor middleware, it's essentially the same. But basically, they've aligned the programming model across the multiple languages. The inspector middleware is super cool and allows you to inspect the JSON packages on the way in and out, which is super useful. There's a built-in unit testing framework, so there's a lot of goodness in the newer versions of the Bot Framework. And we wanted to make sure that all of our Teams developers could leverage all of those things. Teams in the Bot Framework v4 is also pretty awesome. We've done a lot of work to make, particularly around messaging extensions. They are a lot simpler to work with. We've tried to simplify most of the helper functions and make sure that they're a little bit easier to work with. We've done a lot of work aligning the samples in the documentation to make sure when you do end up moving back and forth between the two documentation repositories, they're not saying different things. We think that this is going to be the first step on a path. Obviously, if you notice anything that looks weird or something that doesn't work, please feel free to let us know. But we really hope that this is a significantly easier way to work with bots. So let's go ahead and jump into some code. So for today's demo stuff, I'm not going to run a lot of things. I'm mostly just going to. So I'm going to run through some of the resources that are available for you and where sort of all of this stuff lives. I'll jump into the samples that we have now on the bot framework and walk you through sort of the purpose behind each of those samples and give you some introductions to the eventing model as well as the helper functions that exist. And we'll kind of jump around. And feel free to jump in and ask me if you've got any questions. This has sort of been to be a little bit more interactive moving forward. Okay, so the bot framework samples. If you haven't ever been to the bot framework sample repository, it's on GitHub. Microsoft/botbuilder-samples is the URL. And on here, there is a full set of bot samples, some that are specific to Teams now and some that are not specific to Teams now. The not specific to Teams now ones all should work in Teams, but haven't been extensively tested in Teams. But to give you so the team samples are all in the 50s, and we have a full set of samples for messaging extensions, as well as task modules, some cool things like link unfurling, uploading files, just sort of your conversation bot sample that shows all the different things that you can do in sort of conversation bots. So we've got 8 samples that are specific to Teams in both C# and JavaScript. And as the bot framework adds new support for new languages, we will also continue to add support for new languages, Python and TypeScript. Well, TypeScript's already supported, but we don't have TypeScript samples yet. Python samples. Python will be supported in a future release, a very near future release of the bot framework. And then Java support will also be coming eventually as well. So as those things all come, we will also be building team samples for all of those things. So it would be pretty cool. They should all just exist and you'll be able to find them. For those of you who have never been to our documentation repository, it's aka.ms/teamsdev. I'll send out that link, or that link will be on a slide later on. But this is our landing page. If you ever can't find any sample or anything that you're looking for, this is a good place to go to find it, because we list most all of the things. So if you're looking for, like, example of the SDKs, you can find all of the SDKs here. Victor's amazing Yeoman generator exists here. You can find that. And if you're curious, the Yeoman generator will use the current version of the SDK. So if you knew up a JavaScript or TypeScript bot using the Yeoman generator, you'll get the new version, the version that I'm talking about right now. All of our samples are listed here. The amazing app templates, production ready stuff. All of these things are listed here, and it's sort of an easy index into most of all of our content. So if you ever can't find anything, I highly suggest starting here. That should point you in the right direction. So another thing that we've done is rewritten almost all of the bot as well as messaging extension guidance. If you remember before, if you've ever looked at messaging extensions, there was only a couple articles and it was a lot of, and now go figure out this on your own. Most everything now has C# and JavaScript examples for pretty much everything that will guide you through implementing it however you need. And we've gone through and made a lot of effort to hopefully make this a lot more streamlined in terms of following this and actually accomplishing something at the end. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the documentation recently, I highly suggest taking a look and using it then the next time that you're building teams at your Teams app. It's not just bots and messaging extensions that have been pretty refactored. Most everything has been pretty refactored. And we would love any feedback that you have on the documentation. We're always striving to make this better. So if you see something that doesn't make sense, or if you really like something, please let us know, and we will take action on that. From here, I don't know if everybody knows about this, but when you're in GitHub, you can, so our documentation repositories are backed by GitHub, which means you can actually submit pull requests. Our documentation is completely open source. So if you didn't know, you can actually click this little edit button right here, which will drop you into the GitHub version of this. And if you wanted to suggest changes to the documentation, feel free. We do accept pull requests from the community on the documentation. You can also open, if you use the feedback module down at the bottom, this actually opens GitHub issues, which is pretty cool. You can manage them just like we manage them, just like any other GitHub issue. We also, I'll give a link out to this page later on as well. In our document repository, we have a feedback page that outlines the various ways that you can reach out to us to get support. We answer questions on Stack Overflow. We answer pretty much all of our GitHub issues. We have a user voice, and we actually have an email address that you can reach out to. So if you're ever curious about how to get a hold of us and you don't remember my Twitter handle, this page will guide you towards getting in contact with us. All of these various channels go to the same group of 10, 15 people who handle all of this stuff. And if we don't know the answers, we will point you in the right direction or find the right person who can. So please use this page and get in contact with us. We love feedback. It's how we build a good product. So please feel free to reach out to us. And last but not least, we have started adding courses to the Microsoft Learn platform, which we're pretty excited about. You can earn badges. You can there's a Microsoft 365 developer certification that you can get. That's in beta. That's based on these Learn courses. And as we add more of them, we hope to have sort of a complete beginning to end. If you take all of these courses, you should be able to, 200, 250 level build apps on Microsoft Teams. So this is an example of the introduction course. You can find all of them listed on our homepage that exists. So right now we only have an introduction in tabs. Course task module course is coming in the next couple of days, but that will sort of, as we release those, you'll be able to find them here. And there will also be a full learning path, and that whole world will get more and more expanded. So if you've ever messed around with our old learning modules that we had that were just sort of natively on GitHub and you downloaded them and they were kind of interesting, we're pretty proud of the MS Learn ones. I think they're pretty good, and we're transitioning to MS Learn as our platform for guided learning. Okay, that's enough not bot stuff. Okay, so is this way too small to read? Can someone let me know?
Hey, this is Casey. That's pretty small. I also asked a quick question. Those tests that you had mentioned, will those be eligible for competencies for CSP partners?
So I think the Microsoft 365 developer certification course will be. I don't think the Learn modules, I don't think they are. They're not intended to be super strenuous in terms of answering the questions. But I think the actual Microsoft, there's a So this is our new exam that includes, Teams. Looks like we just came out of beta. It was in beta a little bit ago, but it's not. I believe this exam does, but I don't think the Learn module.
Thanks.
Yep. So let's. So we're going to take a look at a couple of them. So we're going to start out with the just sort of the conversational bot sample. If you haven't seen any V4 bot, this is quite a bit simpler than it used to be. Basically, you inherit from this Teams activity handler which is going to allow you to subscribe by overriding a bunch of events, which will allow you to subscribe to events, essentially. So for example, this right here, so what we're doing is we're subscribing to the on message activity async event, which allows you to, which fires anytime your bot receives a message activity of any kind. So it's going to pass in for you and make available for you the turn context, as well as cancellation token, as always. But that allows you to, basically the whole idea here is that you used to, every single time you started a bot, you started with that giant case switch statement when you were trying to figure out, okay, what's this incoming payload mean? I have to dig into the JSON and figure out, oh, now it's one of these things or it's one of those things. We wanted to abstract, the bot framework team wanted to abstract away sort of all of that framework information away from you and allow a more stringent eventing model so that you can subscribe to different events and handle them sort of one-on-one. So you can see here we also have support for things like removing recipient mentions from the message. This strips out the mention text from the message text, so it makes it easier to parse it if you're parsing your messages. And then we have team-specific events. All of the team-specific events. So you'll notice that we're inheriting from the Teams activity handler. For a non-Teams bot, you would inherit from just the activity handler, as opposed to the Teams activity handler. The Teams activity handler is a superset of the core activity handler, which augments the core activity handler with all of the Teams-specific events. For example, the on Teams members added async event, which is fires when a member is added to a team where the bot exists. So you can see what we've done here is we've pulled out and we'll pass into you the relevant info from the JSON objects, hopefully minimizing the amount of time you have to drop in and manually parse the JSON. So we're going to pass you the list of Teams channel accounts that were added, the team info object from the JSON package, and then the turn context and the cancellation token, which are always there. And that allows you to just sort of ignore the framework side or the JSON parsing side of this, and just iterate through the list of team members and do whatever it is that you need to do with them. So that's kind of the core idea behind all of this is there should be an event for all of the things that you need, and that event should first class a bunch of the information that you should need, so you don't have to jump in and parse it. We also have again a bunch of helper methods to help you do things like pull the Teams channel ID out of the activity object, get all of the team members, and sort of the three that previously existed: get team details, get members, and get the list of channels. Those exist in the new world, as well as a lot of strong typing around messaging extensions. So for conversational bots, the world isn't super different. If you're building a conversation bot, it's pretty much the same. You'll use a different NuGet packages. Well, you'll use fewer NuGet packages essentially, but the world doesn't change that much. Where stuff really starts to change is when we start to look at messaging extensions, and we'll start off with the search extension. So messaging extensions are personally my favorite portion of the Teams platform. I think they're incredibly powerful and you can do a lot with them. Unfortunately, they used to be pretty hard to build. I think with the new SDK, they are significantly easier to build. And if you looked at them before and went, this doesn't make any sense, I really hope that you take a look at them again, because I think that the new world they are a lot easier to build. So let me actually So just to demonstrate very quickly what a messaging extension is, for those of you that don't know it, a messaging extension, we're gonna talk about two different kinds. A search-based messaging extension allows you to quickly search in some external system and pull the information from that system into Teams and share it as an adaptive card or as a card, not necessarily an adaptive card. For example, there's a GitHub search extension which allows you to search GitHub and return information from GitHub. And once you find something, I don't know that mine's configured correctly, so I've been messing around with it a lot lately, so this might not actually load, but allows you to search for things like pull requests and pull them into Teams and in the form of a card. I don't want to click on some of the other ones because I'm afraid I shouldn't, but that's basically the core idea of a search extension. So the search criteria goes here, and then that gets sent to your bot as an invoke. On the bot side, what your bot is going to get, this event will fire. The on Teams messaging extension query async event will fire. And that will give you the query, which is the search term that the end user is looking for. So basically, if you wanted to build a search extension, all you need to do is subscribe to this one event, grab the search term. In this case, this one's actually looking at find packages. The sample looks for NuGet packages, I think. So I think this find pack will show you, but I'm pretty sure it searches for NuGet packages, just passes it to their API and says, hey, is there any packages that match this text? Builds a card attachment. If you're building a search extension, the part that always hangs people up is the necessity of using a preview card when you're returning adaptive cards. So your messaging extension does two things. First, your search results get returned into a list. Then the user selects one of those things from the list, and so what's in the list is the preview cards, and what they select is the resulting full-size card that they're going to insert into the channel or chat. So you need to make sure that if you're using an adaptive card or a card that doesn't have a native preview version of the card, that you include a preview card in your attachments that you're sending back. Anyway, but basically, it's pretty straightforward. You subscribe to this event, you build a list of attachments, and then you send it back. And that's it. That's all you have to do. You built a search extension. If you want to, this one implements this one makes it even a little bit more complex because it has a tap card action, which means it'll invoke your bot a second time when you select an item from the list. That'll fire this on Teams messaging extension select item async, which is an awesome name. Event, which will allow you to take basically the item that they selected and expand it. You can do this for performance reasons. If you don't want your original set of attachments to be super large and you're afraid about performance, you can send just the previews and then create the full-size card when they have the user actually. But yeah, that's basically a search extension. If you've ever built a search extension before this, it was not 40 lines of code. It was 400 lines of code. So this is, I hope, significantly easier, and we're pretty proud of it. Similarly, with message actions. So a message action, I'll show you just in case you haven't seen a message action. We'll jump back over here. Polly is a good example of a message action. So Polly is going to pop up a poll. So message action basically invokes a task module that you can populate either by via a embedded web view, which is essentially a tab inside of a task module, called a content page inside of a task module, or an adaptive card. Then the user fills out information, and then that information gets sent to your bot. But basically, there's a set of events that happens around those as well that you're going to subscribe to, and that will first class a bunch of the information that you need when you're subscribing to that event. For example, this event fires. when the task module is submitted. So when they click the submit button, this event will fire, and you'll respond to that event. In this case, this is responding with by inserting cards into the conversation. These are out of order. So it's not missing an event, which is rather interesting. So to populate the original task module that pops up, I mentioned two options. You could use a web content page, or you could use a adaptive card. You also have the option of inside your app manifest defining a preset card, which is essentially creating an adaptive card with a limited set of options. So if you're going for super simple and ready to get started really quickly, you can actually define your card inside of your manifest. And if you do that, which I can actually show what that looks like. If you define it inside your manifest, it looks something like this, where it's just defining a very simple adaptive card with 3 fields. By doing that, what that means is the entire task module, or the entire action command, is just responding to this one event. Because when the user clicks the button, the manifest loads the card that you want, and then when they click submit on that card, the end user clicks submit, it will fire this one event. And all you need to do is handle that one single event. So your entire action messaging extension in this case is only a couple hundred lines of code, which is pretty cool.
Andrew, there was one question so far.
Mm-hmm.
You said a beginner question. How did deinstaller remove a custom app from Teams? Tested the Icebreaker app, but don't know how to remove it clean.
Remove it clean. So app installations inside Teams are always context specific. So you are installing that app into a particular location. So it's always a combination of the app and the location that you installed it. There is no all-up way to say uninstall this thing from all known locations. You essentially have to go to the places where you installed it and uninstall it from each of those individual locations. There's no, well, there is kind of. You can go, if you are a tenant admin, you can always go and disable the app at your tenant level settings if you've installed it to your line of business app catalog, or it's a store app and you want it to be off and no one to be able to experience it. But if you just want to manually uninstall it, you need to go to each context that you installed it and uninstall it from that context. For example, your personal apps, you would come over here and you right click uninstall. From a team, you would manage team, go to apps, and then you would uninstall it from there. And let's see, well, yeah, that's pretty much that. Oh, from a group chat, it's similar experience. It's a little bit harder to uninstall them from a group chat, but essentially you would need to go to every context where you installed the thing and manually uninstall it, which if 5,000 people have installed it as a personal app can be quite difficult to do. And with those cases, you typically need to disable it at the tenant level if you really want to turn it off. Okay, so back to Bot Framework v4. So there's a couple other samples here. We have a file upload sample, a link unfurling sample, which is like a search extension, but for when URLs are pasted into the compose message area. There's also an example for working with task modules from bots, and a for authentication that shows how to do authentication based on the bot frameworks that uses the bot frameworks what's it called, token service to manage user tokens and store them for you once you receive them. That's pretty cool. There are definitely some limitations on the token service, but if you can use it, it's a good way to get authentication up and running pretty quickly. Yeah. So, anyways, if you haven't, I highly suggest checking out the team samples. We have a pretty extensive list of samples. They should be able to point you in the right direction. If you notice anything wrong or anything off, or you want to see anything, the Bot Framework team is almost 100% open source. They accept pull requests. If you want to build your new sample or anything like that, let me know, and I can point you in the right direction. If you just want to get feedback, again, we have the Happy Feedback page, so please feel free to reach out. So that concludes the demo portion of today. So one thing that I just, dang it, I wanted to actually go through all these slides. So, well, oops. Okay, so I'm going to cover this just because I was supposed to do this before I talked demo stuff, but I want to do it anyways. Lots of times there's confusion about what the heck we mean when we say a Teams app, because it can be a little bit confusing. So there's three pieces to a Teams app. The Teams client, which is the extensibility and UI points that allow users to interact with your app. Your web services that you're hosting somewhere that must be publicly available. In the case of a bot, either a messaging extension or a conversational bot, it's just a web app, which is essentially an API that conforms to the bot framework's messaging protocols and that you register as a service with the bot framework. And then there's the actual app package, which is the thing you install inside Teams, which is just the JSON file and your icons that the Teams client will ignore if you're sideloading apps. So, but basically, really all you need is that JSON file. One thing I do want to highlight in these slides, I guess for the recording, is the example apps. So if you've never worked with messaging extensions, it's a good thing one of the easiest ways to figure out what they are and how they work is to check out some of the apps from the store that use that functionality. So a good example for search commands for messaging extensions is the GitHub app. A good example for action commands is Lucidchart is a great one. Polly is a great one. There's a couple of pretty good action command based messaging extensions that you can use. There's also a sample. So there's also a different flavor of action command. It's where the bot inserts the final result directly into the conversation as a bot message rather than allowing the end user to do it. This is the flow that Polly follows, which is slightly different than the flow that Lucidchart follows. So if you want to compare the two flows, you can compare Lucidchart with Polly, and it'll show you sort of the two flavors of flow. Lucidchart is going to allow the end user to submit the message into the channel. Polly is going to insert the message into the channel as the bot. This allows a couple different things. When the end user inserts the message into the channel, that means they have control of updating it and or deleting it in the future. The bot won't be able to edit it or delete it. On the other hand, like with the Polly poll, Polly is going to insert the poll into the channel. So then Polly can update the card or delete it, but the end user doesn't have the ability to update the card update the actual message. They can respond to the card, but they can't change the message. And they also can't delete it. So a couple different flavors of ways depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. Conversational bots, there's lots of them, so I didn't list an example. This is the slide I was looking for. So conversation events, in our documentation, we list all of the events that are possible for both conversations and messaging extensions. This is a brief example of all of the ones that are available for conversations. So there's a top level event that you can subscribe to for any of these things, which will pull out and parse the right information for you and give you the information that you need in order to handle that event. So what's coming next? Right now in developer preview, we have at mention in adaptive cards. This is the ability to add inside the card text itself an at mention, similar to the way you would in a text message. And then we also have adaptive cards 1.2 support is in developer preview. Adaptive card 1.2 support will actually work with just in the normal branch on desktop and web client. We're still working out a bunch of bugs on mobile. So you don't actually need to turn on developer preview to see adaptive card 1.2 adaptive cards working. They will work in production, but they will not work, or at least will not work well on mobile in production. So they are still in developer preview until we get the mobile kinks worked out, which we expect in the very near future. Also in the near future, paginated roster support for large teams. Right now, our roster call will work, depending on where you're calling it from, up to about 5,000 members. We need a paginated version of that. so that you can more cleanly retrieve rosters that are that large. So that's something that we're working on and should be released in the near future, as well as guidance and samples for using web-based SSO with bots and messaging extensions. If you aren't aware, we have in developer preview, I don't know if it's GA yet, it's pretty close to GA, the ability to do web-based SSO. The guidance that exists right now focuses primarily on using it with tabs. We want to update that guidance and provide samples for using that authentication flow with bots and messaging extensions as well. Because yeah, so when I say web-based, what I essentially mean is it's client side using the our JavaScript SDK. So if there are ways to use that from bots and messaging extensions as well, not just tabs. And we want to get that out and available for everybody. Questions? And again, the couple links that I said I was going to give out, our developer documentation index all up page is aka.ms/teamsdev, and the developer feedback page is /teamsdevfeedback. You can also find the feedback page at the index page. But yeah, if you ever need to find anything, those two links hopefully will point you in the right direction.
There was one question about if adaptive cards are coming to webhooks.
That's on the backlog. It is not currently in progress. It's definitely something we have talked about and we're looking at, but it is not something that's currently in development.
Is there going to be any progress on having bots get a copy of messages in group chat without requiring a bot mention?
So that's definitely something that we have worked on, and we have some prototypes figured out for how to do that. But what we are working on is more around privacy and control and issues where with sort of the administrative side of sending bots that many messages. It changes pretty drastically from an admin perspective, the way bots work inside of Teams. So that's where the more of the concern is. Technically, we've solved the problem, but we're trying to figure out how to make sure that everything makes sense. And we also have.
I mean, as a suggestion, you could let the Teams admins, or the domain admin decide if they would like a bot to have that permission. And this will be similar to UCMA bots that we have been used to working with prior.
Yeah. So, and the question mark right now is whether or not we do that through Graph or not, essentially. So, Graph is coming out with they announced at Ignite resource-specific consent, which allows sort of a more scoped consent model to this app has permissions in this context rather than this app has this permission, the scope all over the world. Or all over this organization. So there will be movement on this within the next 6 months.
Okay, just to follow up on the consent of the scopes, notifications is one of the permissions, right, that one can ask for. What do these notifications actually do? Are they like HTML5 notifications where we can have service workers running in web tabs sending notifications, or what is the intention behind those notification permissions alongside that appear alongside camera, audio, etc.?
I actually am not familiar with that. I will need to take that one offline and figure that out. I'm not sure. Sorry, I can't answer that one.
I'll hold further questions to give other people a chance to ask theirs.
Where can I find out more about scoped consent? Sorry, I know that may be out of scope, but are you guys going to GA scoped consent so the rest of us can constrain stuff?
So yes, yes, we are.
Okay.
I don't have a firm date yet, but we announced it at Ignite, and it is definitely something that we've been working hard. Let me see if I can find.
Yeah, are there any links or any where we can learn how we wander deeper into the scoped consent experience as far as Microsoft is concerned, as it pertains to Graph and constraining, Azure resources and stuff? That would be just wonderful.
I might have to follow up and put it in chat after.
No worries. However, whenever, however.
Okay.
Hello, may I have a short question regarding message extension? So do we support search actions in mobile on mobile devices? Because, for example, if you want to do some actions with existing message, like so we have this kind of message extension. So as far as I know, it's not supported now on mobile devices. So maybe there's any plans for it.
So right now on mobile, what is supported is search extensions. What does not work are message actions. So you can trigger a messaging extension from an action you can trigger a messaging extension action command from a message, which sends the message payload to the bot for processing and allows you to do things with it. Turn this message into a sales contact or into a sales lead or a work item in my work item section. That does not currently work from mobile, but that is definitely in progress. Full fidelity between the two platforms. So it should be not a very long time before that happens.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a quick questions related to the authentication. So the bot has the bot framework has a lot of different integration point in Teams, like extension, messaging extension is one, and the bot builder. Is there any possibility that the authentication can be integrated for the tab and bot both together at once using the bot framework?
So to do authentication for both tab and a bot, you will not use the bot frame. Well, you depends on how you cache your user token. Right now, the unified sort of story is definitely using the client-side web-based auth. We're working on expanding that story as well as trying to make that a lot clearer. I know our guidance on authentication is kind of a mess, but right now you can use the web-based auth flow, definitely.
Yes, that's true. Actually, we use the tab authentication to complete the bot authentication, and which authenticates every place, but actually it messes up with the user experience because we actually initiate the bot authentication, the tab authentication even from the bot to make it both together, and we set the cookies and to ensure that the tab is authenticated. However, there is another issue, which is the cross communication between the tab and the bot. From the bot to tab, it's easy to jump through the deep link, whereas we find it extremely difficult if really want to navigate from the tab to back to the bot, or set a context or start any conversation directly from the tab app. So is there any new feature which is being added or is it planned to add which can enable the communication between a tab and a bot?
That's interesting. Have you tried, so you want to both send a message and navigate the user from your tab, or just send a message?
So we are already doing it from the bot to tab, which is a deep link, right? We can build the deep link and then can take it to our tab app in a specific place. However, if in our app, if we really want to, let's say, we have an appointment in our tab app, and on click of which we really want to take it to the bot, which can notify all our team members, okay, this is an upcoming notification about this particular calendar appointment. So we haven't found a way to communicate back from the tab to the bot, and that there was no other way in the previous version of the bot framework.
I think we just changed, so we are passing through the necessary ID you need in order to create a deep link to the one-to-one conversation from your tab. So I think you could actually accomplish this with a deep link and a proactive message. You would only be able to drop the user, well, you could drop them anywhere, but you should be able to move them to your one-to-one conversation with the bot and use proactive messaging to send a message there. But I think this one would probably be best. Can you do me a favor and either open an issue on our feedback page or send us an email, and I can totally follow up with you and put you in contact with some people who can help repro and solve this better than I can on the call.
Sure, that sounds good. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, just add my my GitHub alias is clearab. Just go ahead and add that on whatever you send, and I'll make sure it gets followed up.
I will do that.
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Don't thank me yet. We haven't solved anything yet, but hopefully we will.
Did this question get answered? Can you share any news on Graph being able to send a one-on-one team chat? Currently in Graph, you can reply to a chat only if it's pre-existing. You can't send a message to a user.
I have no new news on that endpoint other than I know that the Graph team is aware that that is a key ask. Yes.
And we do have Microsoft Graph community calls as well that are more specific to Graph. So you could join those. The next one is the first Tuesday in January. If you're not already attending those, you can kind of get the cross of this one and that one. So, and I can put that in the IM chat as well.
The combination of Graph and Teams apps is something is going to be a heavy investment for us in the next 12 months. We've sort of built this world where Graph is kind of on the side of Teams apps, and we definitely want to start bringing them closer and closer together, which the new webhook APIs and resource-specific consent, which there's unfortunately, I found the Ignite announcement article about it, but unfortunately there's not a link to more information. So that probably means we haven't actually published any more information than announcing that it exists. So if you check out our Ignite, the Microsoft Graph Ignite blog post, it does mention resource-specific consent, which was one of the questions from earlier. But that's I think that's as much as we've publicly announced.
And one of our upcoming calls, I think it might be February, we'll be talking on the Microsoft Graph call about resource-specific consent. So if you are interested in that, you can definitely join that call. And there will be announcements about what the agenda items will be, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be February.
Okay. If you think you are not interested in that call, I would say that you probably are. Definitely.
Exactly.
Resource-specific consent is going to change the way that Graph and Teams apps interact, and will significantly open a lot of new workflows and ways to build Teams apps that were locked behind tenant admin approval before. It's going to allow team owners to consent, and it's a pretty big deal. So if I highly recommend, if there's a community call where we're going to be talking about that, it's probably going to be Nick, and he's awesome, and it will be well worth your time.
Any last questions?
Yeah, are there any code samples around how to, so what we want to do is from our bot, we want to send some custom data down to the conversation tab, let's say through Adaptive Card or some other means. And then when the user clicks on it, the focus should switch to a tab, but then that custom data gets passed along to the tab as well. And not your normal context like user ID and etc., but some custom data that we have passed from our bot, and we want that data to become available in the custom tab. That makes sense?
So you can do this by creating. There's a couple different paths for how to do that. It kind of depends on exactly what flow that you would want. You could either use a task module to, because there's an event when the task module is submitted. There's also an event for, basically you could use a open URL link in your card. If you're doing it from a conversational bot with a card inserted into a chat or a channel conversation, you would use probably an open URL action, which is a deep link to your tab, but you would need to pass the information from your web service to your web service. The Teams client wouldn't pass that information for you. So essentially, the action would submit the information to your bot service, and your bot service would need to pass it to the tab. I don't think there's a way, you might be able to do something with query strings, but off the top of my head, I don't know if there's a way to make the Teams client pass it directly to your tab. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, on the back end is okay, then we issue a redirect back to the tab. But, Teams, anyway, I think that answers my question for now.
Yeah, I think you're going to run into session issues and stuff, obviously, if you're passing it from backend to backend, which is annoying. But yeah, if, that's an interesting question, and I might not know everything that exists. So I would also ask if you could send that to either our email address or open a GitHub issue. There's a couple other people who could probably help as well.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. That was the last call for this particular series and 2019. Again, don't forget to download the new call series for January 2020, which the next call will be January 21st. And again, we'll post the recording and we'll do a summary with some of the Q&A on our blog. So follow us on Twitter at OfficeDev and you'll get all the latest announcements as to when everything's ready. Thank you and have a great holiday.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.